The NYU Abu Dhabi Art Gallery is an intimate museum space in a university setting. At the Art Gallery, we present curated exhibitions of art and culture of local relevance and international significance. We also invite you to explore our exhibitions in the project space and around campus, as well as our activities both online and in our reading room.
The reading room, located next to the Art Gallery. It's a space all communities can utilize and learn more about a wide variety of different topics.
The project space is the NYUAD Art Gallery's auxiliary venue to nurture young emerging artists and curators.
We support a number of other art projects and activities beyond our exhibition spaces. We care for the permanent art installations on campus, like Hassan Sharif's Copper Wire, which welcomes guests to NYUAD.
We aim to create an atmosphere where everyone feels encouraged to share their thoughts and experiences.
We hope that you will visit us online and in person to discover our exhibitions, events, and publications. We look forward to welcoming you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening at our Off the Stage series presented by Mubadala. My name is Reem Saleh, and I'm the Associate Director for External Relations and Partnerships at the Art Center. This evening's Arts Chats, Developing Networks in the Arts, is presented in partnership with NYU Abu Dhabi Art Gallery and NYU Abu Dhabi Career Development Center, and is part of our Off the Stage, which also includes community dinners, visits to NYU Abu Dhabi classes, post-show Q&As, and career chats. This series is also in line with the UAE's commitment to the International Year of Creative Economies for Sustainable Development. Artists in residence are involved in various off-the-stage events, and the best way to hear about them is through our newsletter or by checking the Off the Stage tab on our website. We also invite incredible leaders in the field of visual and performing arts to be part of our chat series. I want to thank and welcome our panelists, Dorian Paul Rogers, performance poet, hip-hop artist, educator, and founder of the famous Rooftop Rhythms, Maya Allison, founding executive director of the NYU Abu Dhabi Art Gallery and chief curator at NYU Abu Dhabi, Mikey Muhanna, founder and executive director of Afrika, and Munira Sayegh, independent curator and cultural instigator based in Abu Dhabi. This chat is moderated by Auguste Nomeikaite, who is a senior at New York University, Abu Dhabi, majoring in film and new media with a minor in visual arts. We will have a Q&A session with the panel at the end of the conversation, so feel free to post your questions in the chat. Our chats are recorded for social media and internal archiving purposes. I will now hand over to Auguste.
Yes, hello. It is really an incredible opportunity to be here and to have quite a few really accomplished artists and other practitioners with us here today. So I'd like to begin by posing a question, just kind of broadly addressing the topic of today, which is networking in the arts. And my question is, what does networking in the arts look like? How is it different from non-creative industries? This is a question to all of you, but I was wondering if Maya, you would like to maybe share first.
I have to unmute. And the question is, how is networking in the arts different?
Yes.
From other kinds of networking? I actually think that networking everywhere is a word that means different things to different people, both in the arts and elsewhere. And that when we say networking, we might mean hustling, trying to make connections, trying to build relationships, get money, get shows, that sort of thing. Or the way that I like to think of it is network building, which is building relationships that over time grow and mature into something. And so in the arts, it's the main difference is that there's not a clear roadmap of one way to do it. There are many different ways of network making. Yeah.
For sure. I saw a bit of nodding and a bit of hesitance on the other panelist faces. And I'm wondering if you have anything to add to it as to what is specific about networking in the creative industries.
I'll add, I come from a background of poetry and spoken word and performing arts. And so a big part of what we do at Rooftop Rhythms is a poetry open mic. And so I think networking in the arts, when it comes to performing poetry, it's really important to make sure that you have a foundation of a safe space. I think that's really important for, networking and building relationships with artists, because first off, they want to feel that their voice will be respected when they come on stage. A lot of times we're dealing with a lot of first-time artists, emergent artists who may have never performed before. And it may be quite intimidating to be in front of a larger crowd of people with more established poets. So I think there is this networking, this natural networking that happens between the venue, the production team. We co-present this event with our center at NYU Abu Dhabi, so it's important for them to believe in the reputation and the character of the MC of the show, as well as the entities producing the event. And I think that's kind of the beginnings of networking in the arts for me, is for them to feel that they're in a safe space. I agree with Maya that there are a lot of unique elements to networking in the arts, but I also think there is just this common thread of when you talk about networking, for me, I think about my name, my character, and my reputation. So that's very important when I'm considering building any type of relationship with someone, that I also feel like they have a strong name and character, because a lot of people will come to you, as Maya said, about the hustle with, hey, I got this and I can do this and I know this person. And usually you'll notice that that doesn't always do too well when it comes to networking.
Absolutely. There has to be a certain sincerity to it, I think. Mikey, I saw also a bit of nodding while Dorian was speaking.
Sure, I think networking is generally thought of as a pretty dirty word. If you say that you're going to be doing a lot of networking at some event, usually means that that's like one of the worst events you can go to that night, if it's a networking event. So the way I tend to think about it is basically trying to meet people and trying to understand what they're working on, what challenges that they have with, and trying to find ways not to waste their time, and actually like help them gain time. So typically when I reach out to people, I like to try to do a ton of homework beforehand, so that I can actually use their time as a resource and not waste their time having them tell me stuff that's already on their website or already on their the About Us, or not having them like reiterate their origin story that is like plastered directly on everything that they've ever published, and finding ways to try to be useful to them. So I liked what Maya said about basically it's trying to build a network, but also trying to understand existing networks. So networks exist and are there whether you're a part of them or not. And so it's really trying to understand the broader network that already exists and see how you can be useful and plug into them with humility and with sincerity and with respect to other people's time.
Like to add on to that, I think what Mikey was proposing is also very interesting, the idea of like networks existing regardless of you existing as a part of them. But for me, one of the main points of networking is community building. I think that's how I look at it. It's a sense of, participating in a community, being a part of a larger whole. And finding your place in that. I think, to kind of piggyback on what Mikey was saying, this idea of not wasting people's time is it's a healthy way to think. But to also know where you fit and why you fit there and what you can add to it. And from that network, I think naturally, and especially if we're talking about the arts, and if we are to kind of hone into the idea of networking into the UAE, into the creative scene of the UAE today, it's very important to understand that that network then becomes your community. And that those are two words of this kind of the same, different sides of the same coin. And so it's very important, I think, for us to kind of really begin to consider a network as a community, and then understanding that as an ecosystem within itself, and how that begins to kind of move and propel what we're all working towards in the creative scene.
Absolutely. And Munira, thank you for bringing up a very important point, that it's not just about the professional kind of aspect of it, it's also about community. But that leads me to my next question, and maybe you could be also the one to address it, which is, what constitutes a professional sort of like network relationship? Or how do you know if a relationship is a kind of like networking link? Because I think some people, they may think that it's enough to go to an event so that just people know your name, and that's it, that should do the job by itself. But I'm wondering, have you found that in your experience is there anything else that has to happen for it to really be a connection?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always advocate for that sort of human connection, like ask people about their dogs, get to know them, have these conversations, because if you don't, then a lot of people will be approaching a lot of people, and there's plenty new people constantly in the scene. So how do you kind of stick, I guess, in somebody's mind? I think going back to the idea of listening, Auguste, I realized that we had this conversation just yesterday in my Dabas class, but this idea of connecting on a human level, and of connecting on the idea of interest. So it's not that you're connecting with somebody because they can get you somewhere. It's because there is that human sort of experience, shared and lived experience and interest. And then from that, you can really build on a lot of things. And it could be, the simplest thing to exist. And I think networking is also something that we shouldn't think of as a vertical, in its verticality. I think networking is also very horizontal. It's very important to know everybody that is on the ground, and then also building up, I guess, into that pyramid of various hierarchies, but to kind of really flatten that hierarchy and just humanize the experience. I think within that sort of approach, you really can begin to have these conversations, and then one thing pulls to the next, and especially if there are shared interests, then collaboration takes place. And collaboration doesn't have to be at sort of a material end. It could be sort of a thinking collaborator. It could be, as an experience for me, my first exhibition took place in 2017, where Maya was my mentor, and that just stuck for the rest of the time since, and that, that conversation is shaped a lot for me in regards to how I think or how I look at an exhibition. But also having that room to decide on your own is extremely important. So being a part of a network is extremely vital, but also understanding your individuality within it is also what propels people towards you, and I guess vice versa.
For sure. I remember also having a conversation with Dorian a few days ago. And I remember that you had something interesting to say about what you think kind of like a real network connection is for you. And I remember that you talked something about also not just looking at it as like a professional network, but also, like as Munira said, a human kind of connection. And also you stressed the importance of it being artist to artist. Do you mind talking a bit about that?
Yeah, so I think Munira kind of reached on that, is that with the human connection, there is a relationship that materializes or develops, but it begs one to say, okay, then what is the difference between a friendship and a networking relationship? I think they can have elements of many different aspects of a relationship, but when I think of network, for example, like a computer network, I'm thinking of connections and exchanges. right? So networking for me, it starts with when Munira says, I think you have to have that level of human respect. Sometimes there's power imbalance, right? So if I'm a poet and I'm trying to network with the head producer of a museum, there's already kind of a power imbalance there, right? And that may affect the networking relationship. So a big part of what I did over maybe the first 6 years of Rooftop was a lot of it was just go at it on my own and just try to build a kind of a community following. And now it's gotten to the point through the support and the partnership of the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi. We get the official support of the US mission. This came like a few years later, but now I can sit at the table with Bill Bragan, who's a friend, but also the executive artistic director of the Art Center. And when we met, he heard about, so my reputation and my name and the name of, the reputation of the spoken word community preceded me. And so he wanted to know, who should I talk to when I'm kind of moving into Abu Dhabi? And because of the momentum of the movement, not really Dorian Rogers, but the movement of the time we put to build the scene, he asked a powerful person like Bill, who has like 40 years of experience, asked, how can he meet little old Dorian, who more so is like a grassroots organizer? And so I think the beauty in that is the power of kind of wielding your power and bringing something unique to the table, where when you're networking, you can offer something that other people want. And that's the only way I can imagine it as a true networking, because if it's an imbalance, right? If Maya was only Munira's mentor, well, now that's a mentor-mentee relationship. It has levels of networking, but to be like an equal networking relationship, I think it has to have some equality. And what is the exchange of connections, the exchange of networks and relationships? So I agree with her that you want to have, you want to build friendship and respect, but it also has to be this exchange and mutual respect.
This actually reminds me, this calls to mind a really good example of, how a network functions in the arts, because it's true that, I knew Munira for long before we worked together, but in the course of working together, came to sort of understand what she brings to the curatorial field, and her particular perspective became very valuable to me. And so I would say that although it started out with, we're at different points in our career, but that I, as a senior curator, need the eyes of emerging curators to help me see differently. And it's almost like she's mentoring in reverse in a way. So seeing the world, seeing artists through her eyes, and this leads to the network aspect of it, which is that I'm now seeing her curate shows with artists that I didn't know about before. And so that is a network link made from that artist through Munira to me. And that this is actually really crucial to my development as a curator. So networking is a two-way street, no matter what the differential is. In a healthy network, it works that way. And I remember when I was a curatorial assistant in sort of like boot camp with the first curator I worked for, she was like, you get out there and you find the next generation of artists and you come back and tell me about it. And like, I had a very clear marching orders: go see everything and come back and tell me what's worth looking at. And it was this, and I realized that I had she was asking me to be that kind of link, and that this is part of that ecosystem. But then what you do is then you ask that artist to tell you what other artists you think are interesting. So the network expands in all directions. And I think the key there is the generosity of the act of curating, or the act of one artist talking about another artist, is what keeps the network a living, healthy thing that we would think of more as an ecosystem than the negative connotation of the network, which is, in the US, we call it the old boys club, right? Where it's like, we're all in the same, part of the same, little clique, and we're only gonna give favors to people in our little clique, which is the negative connotation of networking. So that was you inspired me to think of that.
Absolutely. I think the kind of image that is coming up right now, hearing all of you talk, is like a network in almost like the literal sense, like imagining almost a web. And I definitely like the word that you, Dorian, used as well. it's also an exchange, and Maya, you also alluded to it, that it's not a one-way street, that is mutual and eventually ripples throughout the whole web. I'm also wondering how does networking actually work? So you will hear people talking about events, showing up, talking. What forms does it take? And I'm really curious to hear about you, Mikey, because I know that you have been dipping into kind of like different networks. And so I'm wondering, how were you able to do that? Is that like, basically my question is showing up to events all that there is to it? Or what other forms does it take?
Is showing up. So I don't think showing up to events is particularly effective if that's all you're doing. That's like buying cans of beans without like opening them. Like it doesn't really nourish, it doesn't actually like do much. So I think, yeah, I mean, if you take out the word network and you like turn it into like a relationship, then all of a sudden it starts to like clarify in your brain that what you're trying to do is like build a relationship, which means like you actually have to go back and forth a lot. You're not trying to collect email addresses or like business cards. You're trying to actually like get to understand somebody. My brother once told me this scale that that I've thought about a lot, and it's basically like stranger, acquaintance, friendly, friend, and family. And the idea is like going from stranger to acquaintance doesn't do much. That really doesn't do much. Like, oh yeah, we met once upon a time. Really, it's about like going from like acquaintance to friendly. And understanding that these people are not going to be your lifelong friends. Maybe you know, Bill turns into Dorian's lifelong friends, but it's really important to have a friendly working relationship with somebody, not just be an acquaintance, not to be like an email that you got like 6 years ago. But the way it works, honestly, in my opinion, is that like it works slowly. Like you don't microwave this stuff, and you just slowly meet somebody once and have a friendly conversation with them and be like, that was fun, that was cool, they seem like they're working on some cool stuff. Next time I'm in town or next time I'm doing something, be friendly, like reach back out and be like, hey, let's grab coffee, I'm doing something that might be interesting to you. Like it's, in a weird way, it's elementary, middle school behavior. It's like, just be friendly, be nice to people, and let things grow, and then also let things die. Some things don't work. Sometimes it doesn't click, and sometimes you don't want to go on a play date with this person, and and that's fine too. So it just takes time. So just be a friendly person and let that sort of working friendship evolve. That's my sort of 2 cents. Yeah, Dorian, do it.
I'd like to add to that, if that's okay. I agree with Mikey. I also think it depends on the personality of the person who is, you know, okay, so I don't know if one word would be the networkee, which is the person trying to do the networking. Usually it's not always like coming together this way. Somebody sometimes solicits the other person, right? So for me, I really respect consistency. So I think Maya talked about this in a conversation we had a few days ago, is that, you know, it actually does mean a lot to some people. I understand, Mikey, it's not enough just to attend. But for me, sometimes that's how people stand out. So one example is a member of the cohort of this Art Center program that we're part of, an artist development program called NYU. This gentleman named Ethan David Lee, he was a student at the time at NYU Abu Dhabi. He now works with the Sheikh Saud bin Sakhr Qasimi Foundation. But at the time, he was just attending the event every month. He would come up to me during the intermission and just say, hey, I'm enjoying the show, having a good time. I would try to get people to introduce themselves. And so after 2, 3, 4 times, it's a shy, tall guy. He keeps standing out. And eventually I ask him, what are you doing? Okay, well, I'm in film. Okay, so now I'm asking him naturally, just trying to be cordial. Okay, so what type of film? And so naturally we just started networking, and that probably happened subconsciously because I do intrinsically value someone who I don't think they were coming to support me. I don't think he was coming to network with me, but just because he was in a space that I saw as a safe space and a beautiful, artist connection environment, I naturally now am asking him questions. And so we're friends to this day. We've been talking about different collaborations, whether that be in theater or with the Auguste Foundation. So now we've built this relationship that it started with my respect for him consistently coming to an event. One more thing I wanted to add is that sometimes networking works good if the person who wants to network, if they ask, how can they be of help? And as opposed to coming to me and saying, hey, I'm a poet, can you do this for me? I think we've all chimed in and saying sometimes that's off-putting, that looks like a hustle, but it could be a hustle if you say, what can I do for you? But it's just like a more servant mentality of being a part, trying to contribute their talents to something. That's one way of building a networking relationship. And one more is what we call breaking bread in America, right? So if I want to work with Mikey, let's say that he does a consultation, hourly consultations. I think it would mean a lot to him, right? If he charged $100 to do a consultation session, if he has some knowledge that I could benefit from, if I have that to invest, why not learn from him? And I don't know, Mikey, if I'm correct, but maybe that would build his respect if at a later time I come to him and say, hey, I have this idea. Well, now he's going to register whether I did that with a motive or not. I think he would appreciate that, wow, this guy is serious. He has a little money if he would invested it in something he believed in, but he also kind of broke bread in the sense that we're supporting, you want to work with art, so okay, well, you can support another artist financially. And I think those are some tips to getting into networking.
Absolutely. And hearing both of you talk, I am also curious about what Munira is thinking, because as an independent curator, and actually both Maya and Munira as curators, I feel like networking plays a very special part. Like it's almost an innate part of your job, right? Like part of it is actually networking and maintaining a network. But Munira, I know that you, in your practice, you also oftentimes go for artists and people who may not have the biggest name in the industry yet, who may not be completely established yet. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you discover those people? How do you find those relationships and how do you maintain them?
I think there's an importance in people approaching you and also being approachable. That's a very important thing, I think, for me on a very personal level. And so, for example, an exhibition that I'm extremely proud of, The Cup and the Saucer, that took place in 2019, all started because Hashel Lemki decided to send me a DM and then decided to come find me at Warehouse 421, where I was working at the time, and have the first conversation. Then he locked a day, which were Mondays. He's like, you'll have to see me every Monday. I was like, but I don't know that I can see you every Monday. And he was like, every Monday that you can see me, you have to see me. And so when I saw that interest from him, I have been approached by various artists and they'll share an interest, but then there's no follow through. And so for me, the follow through is extremely important. Intentionality is extremely important. I'm a very serious person. So I mean, if I'm going to give you my time, I want to know that there's something coming out of it. Again, whether it's on a thinking basis or towards an exhibition or towards some sort of collaboration. So for me, that's one thing. But then also second thing is that's super important is that you have to keep your ears on the pulse. You have to stay close to the ground. And you have to know where and what's breathing around you. Because if you don't, then you fall, no matter where you get in your career, you kind of fall out of the conversation. And I think curating is it's a constant conversation. I'm sure Maya will agree. It's asking questions and listening, and knowing how to instigate these questions. But the moment that you don't know that if you're asking questions to the same people, then you're going to get the same sort of responses. I think one of the most or two of the most interesting things that take place for me in Abu Dhabi is the SIF exhibition at the end of the fellowship, and the Zayed University senior show for the fine arts with the fine arts department. It's important for me to go because the moment that I'm there, I get in and I am looking at work I've never seen before. I'm finding names I don't know of, you know. And so then as soon as I see a work that I find interesting, I reach out to a professor or I reach out to a friend that perhaps knows this group of students that are just graduating, and I ask to be connected. And I think that that's extremely important because the moment, and also I think curating is just, it is networking in many ways and it's constant. So you have to really begin to understand what you find interesting, A. B, once you have that, start to pull, you know, you pull into your network, these people. And so, you know, going into these sort of graduate level, like undergraduate level exhibitions becomes very interesting because not only are you going to find the artists that are showing, especially if you're there at the openings, but you're also going to meet their friends, and their friends are going to be interesting if they're interesting. And so that sort of system that already exists there for you is there for you to approach, I think. And it's also very important for you to be vocal about what you can do and what it is that you are doing. So a label that I've recently adopted is this idea of cultural instigator, because I'm somebody who constantly asks questions. I'm somebody who's always saying, why does it have to work this way? Why can't it work this other way? And in a country where sort of the foundations are being set, we can still participate in how they're being set. And, you know, to understand that the majority of creatives are, let's say, under 30 or under 35, that already tells you a lot. So beginning to kind of think also in this frame of newness, let's call it, becomes important, and it allows you to have that approachability that I initially was discussing.
Maya, I am also extremely curious to hear your perspective as a fellow curator, but I also have kind of A-B section to the question. And I'm also curious to hear, how important is it to maintain connections outside of your kind of professional network? So we've been hearing words like community, we've been hearing words like artists, fellow curators. How important, and is it even important, to also make connection with people who may not, whose work may not directly relate to your expertise?
So my answer I will get to answer this in a slightly circuitous manner. As I'm listening to you all and thinking about what we do, and particularly sort of my history with Munira, but also with Bill Bragan, who I know is in the audience. One of the things that is really precious about this network is that it's sort of like a friendship that is created by a shared conversation, right? So talking about work is really fun. Like, I love to talk about my work because I'm not talking about my work like how many emails I have to do, although I do that too, but talking about the ideas at work is so nourishing and so satisfying and so fundamentally meaningful that when I find other people who can talk with me about what they're working on or bounce ideas off, be sort of a thought partner on what we're thinking about, what we're doing, that is where the sort of the network juice comes from, which is that when I juice in the sort of electricity sense, if we're talking about a network in a literal sense, and that the joy of those conversations is a really profound one, actually. It's really, there's a friendship there, but the friendship is driven by the pleasure of that level of interaction around something that feels so meaningful. And so this leads to the answer to your question, which is that, yes, in fact, having colleagues who, program performing arts is a really valuable connection, because it's another way of thinking about the work that I'm doing and the work that they're doing. And then we help each other see what we're doing differently. And it's sort of, like any kind of exercise of the brain or of the body, anytime you use your muscles differently, you feel healthier, and I think that it's important for artists not to only talk to other artists, but to also talk to poets and musicians, but also to physicists and philosophers, and that this is all part of the kind of creative intelligence at work, and the network that needs all of those things. So you're networking not only to advance your career, but to advance the quality of your thinking and your creative practice. It's really exciting. I love it.
I love that even through a screen, I can hear your excitement just like thinking about it. And especially seeing all the other panelists also nod when Maya was like lighting up with that excitement. I also wanted to ask all of you, when you are looking back at the projects that you've already completed, at the connections that you've made, when you think about some of the connections that had a significant impact on your career, or that you would just consider to be really significant in a professional sense, how did you make those connections? And Munira mentioned one of them a little bit earlier, but I'm really curious to hear, like, in retrospect, what was kind of the one, maybe like even incidental connection that eventually grew into something really significant? I was wondering if Mikey, you would like to begin first.
The one, I think, most of the sort of like mentors I've had over time have been folks who made themselves available to me, but didn't push it and left it for me to actually like water that plant. And so those are the most sort of impactful relationships I've had over time. Folks who were either professional mentors or personal mentors who I really made a point of constantly, not constantly, but consistently rather, checking in with and giving updates. Like if they weren't in the city that I was in, every time I was in New York, going like, hey, I'm in town in 3 weeks. Can I please take you out for coffee? Can we go out for lunch? Do you have an open spot? I'd love to tell you what's going on with me and pick your brain and ask you questions. But yeah, those are probably the strongest relationships to this day that I have, are ones that have really been nourished over time and need a lot of work from my side, where I get much more than I give, but I have to give a significant amount. And so, yeah, those are probably the ones, and the relationships where I'm on the other side of the shoes on the other foot are similar, where I feel like the person who's sort of where I'm the mentor, I can feel them really giving a lot and saying, hey, do you have slot open that we can go out for coffee or speak on the phone? This is what I'm going through. And for those people, I love connecting them. I love plugging them into the network that I'm a part of, because their energy is infectious, and I feel like I'm a sort of, if not a co-writer, I'm a co-editor or a co-producer on their life, and I'm invested. I want them to work on to sort of see what's behind each door. So I'm excited to like point out the doors and give them the keys when I have them.
For sure. I'm curious also to hear from Munira, specifically about those impactful interactions.
I think I have a story for you. I feel I was giving a lecture at ZU for the seniors last week in the fine arts, the fine arts graduates that are going to come about, and somebody asked me about networking, and it made me think about sort of the beginning of what I consider kind of falling into the curatorial scope, or beginning to understand the contemporary art scene in the UAE. And at the age of 21, I was an intern at the Guggenheim, and I was a part of the development department, which was just not my department. And I was there, stuffing envelopes and doing lots of things. And then one day I had to check in. We had to move from the offices, which are in downtown, to the museum, which is uptown. And I had to check in all the board members into their board meeting. And so there were it was raining outside. They were not very nice, and they're just like handing me their coats and their umbrellas. And I was being extremely polite and very respectful. And there was just no interaction, like there was none there. And the lady who was kind of managing sort of the internship for the development space, or the development space within the Guggenheim in New York, wasn't very nice either, and was kind of very hard on me in many ways. And in general, I just think the internship was all kind of fell on this one instance, and I guess this is like networking by mistake, let's call it, like, or networking on a whim, I guess. But I was checking in this older man, and it was raining, and I told him, I was like, it's such a gloomy day outside, and and he spoke to me, and I was like, wow, this is lovely. So I walked him to the elevator, and I have the access pass, so I pressed the button for him. And then I was like, I really hope you have a good meeting and a lovely rest of your day. And he just looked at me and he said, you too. And I said, inshallah, just very naturally. And then the elevator doors are closing, and the guy like opens the door, and he's like, what did you say? And I said, inshallah, it means God willing. He's like, I know exactly what that means. He's like, where are you from? I said, I'm from Abu Dhabi. He's like, we're having a meeting about Abu Dhabi, about the Abu Dhabi Guggenheim, which is where I later ended up working for about 2.5 years. And I left it there, and he went upstairs, and I was just very happy. And, and that was that. I get called into that board meeting, and I get invited to sit on the board table with all of these people who were not very nice to me prior. And the moment that they found out I was from Abu Dhabi, their attitude changed. And it was very interesting for me to see that sort of like social change take place. But in that meeting, I was introduced to Kim, who was the head of education at the Guggenheim in New York. And then Kim just took me under her wing. She was like, I had no idea there was an intern from Abu Dhabi that is at the Guggenheim. She's like, I have to introduce you to the team. And so I told her, I was like, I would love to meet them. And from that, I met, Valerie Hillings, who was the head of the Abu Dhabi Guggenheim project on the New York side. And of course, Reem Fadla, who's now our director of the Cultural Foundation. And these relationships became lasting relationships from before me working with them all the way to today. And there are people that I go back to. There are people that I know I could fall back on. And there are people who I think in Mikey terms had keys and opened up doors for me. And it's very important to then keep those doors open for everybody else, and to also extend that on the other side. And so this idea is, I guess, for me, going back to a very clear moment of the sort of the propelling of my sort of network. It all started with me saying inshallah to this guy who I don't remember his name. I have no idea where he is, but he opened up a door for me, not realizing how much of a space he kind of allowed me into. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the story that came to mind.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a saying, being at the right place at the right time. It's almost like slurping the right thing at the right place, the right person. So now it is time to move to the audience questions, a quick Q&A. And one question that has come up a couple of times actually is relating to social media. So let me read it out. What is the role of social media in your networking? And how do you distinguish between Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn versus real life interactions? I'm wondering if Dorian, you would like to talk about it first?
Yeah, so social media is a big part of what we do. That's how we solicit performers for our various open mics. So it's a good conduit for people to have access to us. I would say Instagram is usually the best. You can usually get a feel for a person by just, even if it's their personal page, just kind of going on their page to see what type of art they like, whether they're sharing their poetry or not, or even if they're in the arts or fellow curator, you can kind of just get a feel for their personality and things that they like to do, and also what type of arts they like, you know, to support and promote. So I'm not as big on Twitter. Facebook's going through a lot right now. In the past, I've used that a lot for paid promotions with events, as I'm sure all of you know about kind of the events platform of Facebook, but a lot of that's currently changing. So I would say Instagram is good. It's important from a networking standpoint to have a good website that you can get for cheap. Once you pay for the hosting and things of that nature in the domain, you can kind of get a professional looking website through like a website like Wix.com. And so I think it's important, whether you are your own brand or you represent some type of entity, it's important to have kind of a landing page for people with whom you're trying to network, to kind of learn more about you. As Mikey said, he's the type that actually does that research right before he meets with you. So that's important when someone Googles you. I know it's a verb now. They can have a curated space where you're leading the narrative, which also would accompany, I guess, you know, any media coverage and things of that nature. So I think, of course, social media is critical. I'm still working on kind of improving and kind of bettering that side of things, but you definitely want to have a strong social media presence to kind of to show your image and what you represent.
And Mikey, you say in the chat that you recommend Squarespace. Besides just the website, do you also find that social media plays a key part in like growing and maintaining your network?
Me? Yeah, for sure. I think it's a huge part. There's something worth mentioning. I think Maya said this right off the jump, which is about authenticity. I think being authentic is a really important part of building relationships, because essentially what you're trying to do through these relationships, whether it's through social media or otherwise, is you're trying to show people who you are, and so that they know what you could possibly do, like what the exchange could be. And so if you're authentically like a wrench, don't try to show off like you're a hammer. You're not. If you're a wrench, just be a wrench. And so social media is by definition or sort of structurally inauthentic. It's curated, it's two-dimensional, it's small, it's not constant. So there are structural challenges that I think are worth sort of overcoming that prevent you from showcasing your authentic self. But for me, it's an enormous a tool I use to connect with people who I think are showing their authentic self, and be like, hey, I think we should like just keep up with each other. It seems like you're up to some really cool stuff. And yes, for me, that's like I use social media to like talk about the professional things I'm doing, but also to like upload Boys to Men covers. And because that's who I am. And like, if you're going to work with me for like more than 30 minutes, you're going to find out that I'm like referencing Biggie lyrics and like talking about like 1990s hip hop, whether we're talking about art in, you know, the 1950s in Baghdad or not. And so I use it as a way to sort of represent myself and connect with people who I think are up to some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and also a sub question to that is, how do you use each platform differently? So the ones named are like Instagram, Facebook, which generated quite a few smiles, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then like, is there kind of a graduation from like social media presence to real life interactions? Or do they completely like exist separately?
Are you asking me again? Yeah, I've had many Insta friends turn into real friends for sure. I think Twitter can do that for some people too. Facebook, I don't think it can do that, but for sure. And I think honestly, like I'm not, no shade thrown at LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn actually serves a similar purpose for a lot of people, where you can build actual professional relationships through LinkedIn. Some people use it that way. So for me, I tend to use Instagram personally almost exclusively. Yeah.
I also, from personal kind of like experience, have noticed that it's a very big thing in the UAE. I feel like kind of having a presence in social media and networking through that. But another question that has come up is relating to human connection. And so I'll read it right now, that human connection is so important and often happens outside of formal sessions. It's that smile you exchange with someone as you grab coffee and then start chatting. So I found networking virtually during the pandemic much harder. How do you bridge the virtual divide? Maya, would you like to tackle that first?
Grown. That's my answer. It's really hard. It's really hard. I think the worst thing in the context of networking is that during this period, so much of the network kind of fell away. We were kind of on our own. We weren't bumping into people and having kind of natural conversations. And that I actually feel like my network, and we all know how much I love networks now, that my network is malnourished. It's really malnourished. And I think this is another reason why we go to, you know, art events and openings and so on. And so trying to reactivate those connections. One thing we did during the pandemic was sort of build some Zoom communities where we would get together to check in, and part of it's very practical and logistical, but it's also to kind of connect with some of the other people who are sort of struggling with the stuff that institutions had to deal with during the pandemic. But now I just literally just yesterday or the day over the weekend, I thought I need to start seeing everybody in person. And so I just started dropping little 15-minute coffee dates on my calendar to like people I knew were going to be on campus at that time, you know. And so I had one just this morning too, actually. It was great. So but I had to really be intentional about it because we've gotten out of the habit of connecting. And you don't realize how lonely that is until you are around people again, but nobody really knows how to do it anymore. It's sort of awkward. It's very awkward, in fact. But yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but I'd love to hear what other people are experiencing.
Yeah, I'd like to add, you know, I think most of us, I'm guessing on this call, I get good energies from everyone here. And so I think a lot of us, you know, we're accessible, you know, so it's just by joining arts chats and, you know, off the stage type events where there are conversations happening. There are people right now typing in the chat and some of us are having the chance to respond or reply. If one of those said, hey, could I email you sometime? I think most of us will have the intention. We may be busy, but we would be open to kind of giving back, because as a lot of some of the people who've spoken here, we are where we are now because of someone who took the time to reach out to us. And so I think one thing is just having thick skin. There will be a lot of scenes in your, when you try to DM someone and they won't respond. But if you have thick skin and you believe in who you are as an artist or whatever you're trying to network about, you have to have that faith that Allah will get your message to a person and they will try to reply and hopefully give you the information you need. One Emirati girl just messaged me on Instagram just this week and said, I'm nervous. She's asking 1,000 questions about the next show. And I could tell that there was something pushing her to message me, and eventually got to the point where she said, I want to perform, but I'm nervous. And I'm just I have so much anxiety. So I thought the most appropriate thing to do in that situation was to reach out to a few of my Emirati female poet friends and ask them, hey, told them about this young lady and said, hey, that would mean a lot to me if we kind of built the network further. Would you be willing to converse with this young Emirati girl because she may not be comfortable speaking to a man? And so the 3 poets I reached out to said, of course. And so I need to follow up. But just through that young lady reaching out to me, I was able to network with her with someone, and who knows, 2 years from now, she may be the star of the spoken word scene. So I think for whoever's asking about that human connection or how do you connect online, I would just say, take the first step and show a person that you're interested. And I believe Allah will do the rest to kind of get a conversation going and hopefully push you in the right direction or get you the information that you're looking for.
Follow-up question from the audience is, can I email you sometime, Dorian?
I would sound like a hypocrite if I said no, so yes, I will put my email address here right now. Okay.
Perfect. So I'll read out the email address just for the recording: info@rooftoprhythms.org. And Maya also put her email address, ma154@nyu.edu. Wonderful.
Come on, Mike. Come on, Mikey. Come on, Munira. Come on, Auguste. Put the emails there.
And as noted, no promises, but good intentions. Mikey at Afrika.com and Munira at derwazalab.com. So on that note, thank you so much to all the panelists to sharing your wisdom, but also, I know, like sharing, as Maya said, like the good intentions. I feel like for me, for example, as a young person who is hoping to someday enter the UAE arts scene, not just as a student, it's so encouraging and actually like so just heartwarming to see people who are actually, not as cold about networking as they sometimes say that people in the real world are. So yes, let me hand it over to Reem right now.
Thank you, Auguste, and our panelists. It's truly inspiring to have you all in one space. One could listen to you for hours. I'd like to also thank you for staying with us. We hope to see you again in our upcoming Off the Stage events. Next week, on November 2nd, we have a creators workshop with Maklit Hadero on social practice and art. And on November 12th, artist talk titled Multiculturalism, Going Deeper and Beyond with artists from Theatre for One. We are here and NYU Abu Dhabi alumni students. You can register for both of these events on our website. Stay safe and see you soon. Thank you.